Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Sunday the 12th of September 2021, and we thought we would share with you an article of where Silicon Valley believes the next hot area for investment to be. Why are we doing this? Well, as we've often stated, we're not currently practicing financial advisors, even though we may hold the qualifications to be one and have been in that role in the past, both domestically and internationally. But it's worth learning the lessons that financial advisors are taught, which are that any serious and sensible advisor would recommend a basket of investment assets, which would include equities, bonds, property, funds, and if they do their job properly, a proportion in precious metals. Of course, outside of this area, you also have fine art and collectibles, and more recently, cryptocurrencies. But at the end of the day, though, what really dictates the success or failure of markets in the main are what the large institutions are doing, simply because they control so much of the monies that are moving into these asset classes. And we, the small, what are often termed retail investor, can have an impact, but frankly it only tends to be very short term. That said, though, we can perhaps follow what these institutions and what some term whales are doing. With this in mind, we saw the following article published by Forbes, which can give us something of a heads up for the future. So let's take a look. Forbes article dated 10th of September 2021. Headline: This is Europe's moment. Lightspeed Venture Partners hire Paul Murphy to lead Europe push, by Ian Martin. That's Paul Murphy. Lightspeed Venture Partners has hired Paul Murphy and Ross Mason to head up its push into Europe as Silicon Valley VCs step up the hunt for deals on the continent. The move from the Menlo Park-based VC fund, which has backed Snapchat, Affirm, and Epic Games, to put down roots in London comes as fundraising and the valuation of European startups have skyrocketed in the last year. Investors have ploughed over $50 billion into European startups this year alone, with the valuation of the continent's most valuable startup, Klarna, leaping to $45.6 billion in June from $10 billion in September. That shift came as investors stopped viewing Europe as an arbitrage play, with valuations typically lower than American rivals, and saw the potential for British and European startups to become global winners, says Murphy. This is Europe's moment. There are so many amazing companies being built right now by incredible founders, and everything is primed now, says Murphy. The question was not whether we should enter Europe, but should we go big? A generation of European founders who have built experience at or sold a business to a Silicon Valley startup, talented developers, and a huge albeit fragmented market was now driving the surge in valuation, says Murphy. Murphy led investments in Hopin, the events platform that skyrocketed to a $7.5 billion valuation just 2 years after its launch. E-scooter startup Tier Mobility and video game developer Clang after joining London-based early-stage investor Northzone in 2018. He also co-founded the video game studio The Dots, which was sold to Take-Two Interactive for $192 million in August 2020, and the GIF library Giphy, which was bought by Facebook in a $400 million deal in May 2020. That deal now faces being unwound by the UK's antitrust regulator. Murphy will be joined by Mason, who will be based out of Geneva. The British entrepreneur had been backed by Lightspeed at his cloud data startup MuleSoft, which was acquired by Salesforce in a $6.5 billion deal in March 2020. Mason will continue investing in cloud, software as a service, and fintech startups like ComplyAdvantage through his Dig Ventures seed fund and advising Lightspeed. We now have had so many unicorn success stories in Europe. There is more of that talent to run tech companies at scale, and that's helping fuel the next generation of companies be more successful more quickly, says Mason, Lightspeed's venture partner. When I told Ravi Mhatre, Lightspeed's managing director, I'm moving back to Europe, he said, let's find a way to work together. And that's something that's typical of Lightspeed. They are very collaborative. The two new hires fit with the dual focus of Lightspeed. Its founding partner's track record is anchored in a string of billion-dollar exits from enterprises and infrastructure plays like Nimble Storage, Nutanix and App Dynamics, while a more recent crop of partners like Midas List investor Jeremy Liu, James Mee and Nicole Quinn have invested in fast-growing consumer startups like Snapchat, Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, and meditation app Calm. Paul is an exceptional investor, and I think he deeply understands what an exceptional founder is and builds the trust with those founders, said Nicole Quinn, Lightspeed's general partner. Ross moved from the UK to Switzerland to really focus on European investing and advising other companies, and is deeply ingrained in the continental European ecosystem. Lightspeed's plan to open a London office has well been trailed, and it has had a partner, Rytis Vitkauskas, based in the British capital since 2019. The VC fund has invested over 500 million in European startups since 2007, with second-hand clothes marketplace Vinted, HR software unicorn Personio, and grocery delivery startup Zap as standouts in its portfolio. We have always made the decision, if we go into a region, then we double down, we triple down. And that's exactly what we plan to do in Europe, says Quinn, who works from the California office, while the fund also has teams in China, Israel, India and Singapore. Lightspeed's push into Europe tracks with moves from rival Valley heavyweight Sequoia to expand its footprint in the UK and Europe. The Menlo Park-based fund hired Luciana Alexandru from Accel Partners in March 2020 to head up a new London office. That push has come amid a wall of capital from Silicon Valley and Wall Street, firms landing in Europe over the last year. That potential threatens some traditional European investors who cannot boast of the same network of big-name exits and international ties that can help startups expand into the US or Asia. Quote, "We would be crazy to try and squeeze out the amazing seed funds here. It's more us coming to the table to say we can add unique value. Perhaps you can make space for us," unquote, says Murphy. End of article. So as you can see, we have startup VCs, Wall Street investors, and other Silicon Valley organizations all eyeing up Europe as a place to invest for the future. Well, you may be wondering, what has all this got to do with us? Well, firstly, anyone watching this channel should have a range of investments in addition to their gold and silver. Secondly, what this does tell us is where the big money and the seed money believe where the future lies. Not the United States, but Europe, London, China, Israel, India, and Singapore. Quite telling, isn't it? Now, it does not mean that the US is finished, far from it. It's still the largest by GDP, but its supremacy is slowly being eaten away. And certainly, though it may take many years and possibly a couple of decades, the future looks brighter elsewhere. It goes without saying, though, that if US companies and institutions ultimately control the capital, then they should also end up controlling the wealth that that capital generates. Whether that will be the ultimate conclusion, we shall have to wait and see. What are your views? Please express them below. Meanwhile, a quick shout out to our weekly update that we published yesterday and a derivative version of that we published earlier today. Links to both are in the description box below. Thank you for listening. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so, press the bell sign so you're notified of our videos as and when they're published, and we'll speak to you soon. Illuminati silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.